Well, everyone, welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Storybox podcast. Today, my friends, I'm delighted to welcome someone who many of you will find fascinating. I found his work very fascinating, and I'm glad that he is joining me today to talk all things about rational thinking or irrational thinking too, because he's an expert on that subject. What makes rational people think irrational things, and so many other wonderful areas that he studies. His name is Dan Ariely. Now, Dan, my friend, I could go on and on about your work, what you do, why you do it. But I thought, since I've got you here, instead of me gushing about it, I thought I'd ask you, would you be able to introduce yourself, my friend? Who are you, what you do, and why do you do it?
Okay. Is this audio or video? What are we recording?
It's both.
It's both. Okay. So the people who see us on video might have noticed that I have half a beard. And this half a beard is kind of a good introduction to who I am, and what I do. So I was badly burned many, many years ago. I was burning about 70% of my body. I was in hospital for about 3 years. And that basically, I have scars all over my body, including the right side of my face. So this side of my face is completely burned, so there's no hair. There's also no perspiration, but there's no hair. So half of my face grows hair, half of my face doesn't. That doesn't explain the half a beard because I could shave. And indeed, for many years I shaved. And when I shaved, I looked less strange, right? Like if you look at me now, it's very stark. There's also this white thing, but it looks very stark. But if I shaved, it would be less stark. So I shaved for many years. And then 8 years ago, I went on a month-long hike for the first time ever. And at the end of this month-long hike, I looked sort of like this. A little bit more hair, a little bit less white. And I didn't like this look. The first time I looked in the mirror, it's very strange. And if you see me now, it's very strange for you too. It was very strange for me as well. I didn't like it at all. But I thought I'll keep it because it reminded me of the month-long hike. So I said, I'll keep it just for a few weeks. And then two strange things happened. The first one was that a few people pinged me on social media thanking me for the half a beard. Why did they thank me for this half a beard? These were people who were struggling with their own injuries. And they were hiding their own injuries. And they thought I was doing this on purpose to say, look how much I don't care. For example, there was a woman who told me that at a young age, she was in a car accident. Her legs were scarred, and she haven't worn a skirt since. And she said, now that I see how you're out with this, I'll maybe I'll try as well. She did. Okay, so that was one thing. And when people wrote me that, I said, okay, maybe it's my role. Maybe my role is to be like a public service announcement. How many people can show scars in such a stark way and maybe normalize it a bit, you know? If you think about it, we don't see that many injured people out in the streets. People hide a lot. Okay, but then the really strange thing happened about 4 months down the line, where all of a sudden I felt that my relationship with my scars have changed. That I started thinking about them as the story of my life. Less like me versus them. I used to feel about my scars like the man with the iron mask, like, you know, that I was a prisoner of my scars. All of a sudden, I felt much more like, okay, you know, some people do tattoos. I have scars. It's the story of my life. You know, I still have pain. I still have limitation. My hand doesn't have much movement. I have all kinds of limitations. But I started feeling more accepting for my own scars. And I started thinking, what happened? Why now? I was injured, 30 years ago. What happened now? And what I realized is that I was doing the same thing that other people were saying, that I was hiding. So think about somebody like me. I start the day smooth on one side, stubble on the other side, very non-symmetrical. After shaving, I become slightly less non-symmetrical, right? So the act of half shaving is also an act of hiding. So not on purpose, but I was actually, looking at the mirror every day and hiding my lack of symmetry. And basically stopping that had an incredible effect on me. Forget about other people, just on me, on this issue of self-acceptance. Okay, now I know we're not here to talk about facial hair, but last point. If you asked me, how would day one feels like with half a beard, I would tell you it's not fun. People would ask questions, people would laugh, kids would point, all kinds of things would happen. But if you ask me what would happen 4 months down the road, what would happen, I would not be able to tell you. This process of getting used to and self-acceptance is not a process that we have a lot of intuition about. And I certainly, even though as a social scientist, I would have missed it. And that's what I think my role is. I think that my role is to help discover these things that people don't have good intuitions about, but actually are the key insights for a better life. Now, I'm not recommending half beards and so on, but if you think about the big meaning, it's the question of what's holding us back and what are the things that we can do to make our lives better. Now, if there's something that we have intuition about, we said, I feel like I need to eat better, sleep more, be nicer to my spouse, no problem. If you have an intuition about it, just go ahead and do it. But if there are things that we don't have good intuition about, then it's the role of social science and people like me to say, here's some recipes for things that could make your life better. Let's explore those and see if they're good for you.
Welcome to the Storybox podcast, first and foremost. Actually, one of my questions was going to be about half the beard. And I was going to ask you about the explosion that you were involved in, what was going through your mind at the time of the explosion. And I guess it kind of leads into my other question, which is when people sort of think about this idea of self-acceptance, understanding that for themselves, what it truly means, if they feel like they are different to, say, what society considers normal, why is it that the rest of society that claim that they're normal ostracize and do not like those that are, quote, different?
Yeah. So, I think, so tomorrow I'm going to Virginia to give a talk at the Holocaust Memorial, the Holocaust Memorial there. And there's a family that has a kid who was badly burned 2 years ago. And they asked me to come an hour earlier and spend some time with this kid. I just got some description, so it looks like it's a tough injury. He's still under. He goes in and out of hospitals like burn patients do. It's going to be tough, right? It's tough for me to see young people with these terrible, complex injuries, knowing the complexity and so on. But I don't know from the 100% complexity how much is real and how much is perceived. And I'll give you myself as an example. So when I got injured, I thought that no woman would ever want me. No, I said, okay. I said before the injury, I was kind of a nice looking kid, maybe an 8, right? On the scale of 0 to 10. Maybe I was an 8. I said, now maybe I'm a 3. I said, why would anybody who has other options settle for a 3? Why wouldn't they just say 8? I'm an 8, I want an 8. And I also asked myself, could I settle? I said, if I used to be an 8 and now I'm a 3 and only a 3 would date me, how would it feel? Would it feel authentic? Would it feel like, imagine I would sleep at night next to somebody who's a 3 and I say, I really want an 8, but because of my scars, I have to settle for a 3. Could I ever come to agree with that? Like, anyway.
It is in the eye of the beholder.
It was very tough as a late teenager. It was very, very tough thoughts, about what's my value in this world, what's my value in the dating market. Eventually, I decided that I was a valuable human being. I decided that I had a role to contribute, but I thought that I'm not going to be a valuable romantic partner. And I went through a phase in which I said, okay, maybe I just need to give it up. Maybe my role is to contribute in other ways, but in the romantic way, nobody would ever care or love me enough. And maybe that's just, some people are creative, some people are not. They give up on creativity. Maybe that's something that I just need to give up. Took me a long time to feel that I was worthy and capable of love, but I'm giving it as an example of something that I felt I could never reach an 8, and that I was a 3. It's not that society told me that.
Yeah.
Right? There are some things that we do to ourselves. And by the way, I did it to myself. That also, getting injured at a young age, very, very tough.
Yeah.
Before your personality is formed, before you have any confidence, you understand your place in life. The moment you still look for your place in life and you get injured, that's a very, very tough, situation. So the kids that I meet, that's always a big part of it, is that they're still forming themselves. And what I did was just try to avoid that part of life. So I think part of it is that there's something in society. I can't tell you how many times I would go to some gathering, and somebody would talk slowly to me. Somebody would talk as if I don't understand. You look at somebody and they look strange, and it's people infer all kinds of things. Maybe you're also retarded, or or my hand, as I said, is very strange. This is the older movement I have. So people, don't know how to shake my hand, right? Some people just hold one finger. Some people shake. I mean, all kinds of people do different things. But every time this happens, it's a very stark reminder that I'm different, right? Every time. I now, not now, but for many years, I basically opt for hugs, right? Because on hugs, I'm the same as everybody else. But the moment I give people the chance for, it's kind of not nice, right? Imagine I gave you my hand. You said, and you're a kind person. Like, you would say, what do? You don't want to hurt me. You don't know what's happening. I'm not blaming anybody for not knowing how to shake this strange hand. But it's kind of a reminder that says, oh, people are worried about me. People don't know what to do. It's awkward for them. It's this. So there's lots of things to figure out. Some is on the side of society. Some of it is the side of the people who are injured. We have a long way to go.
Oh, absolutely, we do. I think the way society is at the moment, with the level of trying to not only accept others that are different, but accepting themselves, even though they know they're different, I think there's a long way to go with that. I mean, even when I was growing up, like trying to accept myself, because I knew that I was different, and I thought that I was never going to get a beautiful woman. And, I had all those worries, and I thought I was the ugliest kid on the block. You name it. All those thoughts came about. And then I sort of grew up, my brain developed a little bit more, and I had life experiences. And here I am. I ended up, dating several beautiful women, and it's great. Not all at once, by the way, at different times.
Different times. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, somebody wrote me a few years ago, and he said that I'm lucky that I have half a beard. And what he meant was that he had a mental issue. And it's true that, when you have a physical disability that is clear, people can empathize with that. Imagine you talk about somebody who, you look at my hand, there's lots of things I can't do. Very hard for me to write, very hard for me to use my hand. It's very obvious. You don't need a lot. If somebody is depressed, what help do they need? We're so far away, even in the workplace, we're so far away from understanding Like if somebody has a wheelchair, we understand very well what we need to do. And we're doing wonderful things for people with wheelchair. If somebody is blind, technology is amazing. It's still, both of those are still tough injuries, but we understand the accommodation. If somebody is manic depressive, if somebody is depressed, if somebody is schizophrenic, what accommodations do they need? We don't have the mental capacity. Like, when it comes to somebody who's blind, you can say, okay, if I was blind, what would I not be able to do? And we can empathize and we can understand and we can, we don't get the full extent of it, but we get somewhere. If you say, okay, if I was in a wheelchair, what would I need? We can go, maybe not 100% of the way, but we can certainly go. But if I say somebody who's manic depressive, like, what do they need? We don't even know how to put ourselves in that state. So we don't put a lot of effort in mental health. That's one thing that happens. But the second is we don't know what are the accommodations that are needed. And we did a big study in one of the consulting companies in the UK. And we asked people, these were consultants, highly functional people. And we asked them if they have an official diagnosis for something that will fall under neurodiversity, all the way from ADHD to autism. And we also asked them, if you don't have an official diagnosis, do you think you have something? And if you went to a doctor, they would diagnose you. Almost a quarter of the people told us that they have an official diagnosis. And slightly more than a quarter of the people told us that they think they had a diagnosis, but they just didn't go to a doctor. And these half, both the people with official diagnosis and self-diagnosis, were dramatically less happy at the workplace.
Huh.
Why? Because it means you need some accommodation.
Yeah.
But we don't even know what they are. So, and let me tell you one other interesting story. Quite a few years ago, there were two explosions at more or less similar times, one in Belgium and one in Holland. Both of them were explosions. Both of them, lots of people got burned. And they went to visit them 8 years after their injury, and they wanted to see how well did they integrate into society. And it turns out the Dutch were very well integrated into society, and the Belgians not so much. Now, why is it? Is it the Dutch and the Belgians are so different? No. The explosion in Belgium was in a train station. And because of that, people lived in very different places. And, after they got injured, they were just they were scattered.
Yeah.
The explosion in Holland happened in a small community. Now, what happened was that in Belgium, the people who got burned didn't want to come out.
Mm.
In Holland, it was a small community. All the community know about it. They did come out. So imagine this story. You go around your life, slightly better, slightly worse. You go about life. Then, boom, something terrible happened. You get injured. Quality of life goes down a lot. Now, you start getting better. You start getting healed. Things are getting better. Maybe you're not at the level that you were before, but you're doing better. Like in my case, after almost 3 years, I could walk a little bit. I could go out if I wanted. I didn't have open wounds anymore, right? So it's not the level that I was before, but certainly not the low of the first few years. Now, at this point, to go out and about is terrible. You go out and about and you realize that there are more things you can't do. Like I remember the first time I went to a friend and they had a dog and the dog jumped on me. And the dog had nails, and people with regular skin, it's not a big issue. But with my skin, it's the transplanted skin is so thin, it just tears it. So, here's this dog jumped on me, tearing my skin on my legs through the pants anyway, it was terrible, right? All of a sudden you go out and you say, oh, I lived in this safe environment and home. I modified it. It was all okay for me. Now I'm going out And I'm realizing I can't do this and I can't do this and I'm not good at this and I can't do this. Another example, burn patients, very tough with temperature regulation. All of this skin doesn't perspire.
Mm.
Like, you don't think about it, but I get very hot, right? And also in cold, it gets very, very painful. You're at home, you put another air conditioning, you set up things. You go to the outside world, all of a sudden it's not under your control. So you go around life gets worse, then you get better, and then if you go out to life, things get worse again. People laugh, people ask questions, you're not capable, you see things that don't work out well, and so on. So in Belgium, people just didn't want to go out, and therefore their life got worse. But in Holland, they went out, and yes, maybe the beginning was tough, but over time they got used to it. People got used to them, and so on, and they basically merged back into life, which is incredibly important.
I wanted to ask you about, because you wrote this book called Misbelief, What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things. And I guess from what you were talking about a moment ago, this idea of self-belief, is it more important to have self-belief in oneself versus having good facts in front of you or good things that I can actually see, evidence?
So having good facts is very important. But one of the things, so let's, I mean, you've read the book, but let's talk about to people who haven't read the book. All my other books start with research that I do. I do research. I have years of research, and then I say, here are these things that are connected. Let me try and write a book about that. This last book was very different. I was brutally attacked by COVID deniers during COVID. Actually, up until now. So I think the last life-threatening letter I got was about 2 months ago. So, for years, but for a while I got death threats every day.
Why?
And they thought that I'm one of the architects of the COVID pandemic and of the vaccine. So they connected me to, like, there was a video that basically said that because of my injury and because of my time in hospital, I started hating healthy people. And that's why I joined Bill Gates and the Cabal and the Illuminati to try and kill as many healthy people as possible. First with the pandemic and then with the vaccine. So anyway, it was a very, very tough period, very aggressive, very hateful, and so on. But my tool is to try and understand human beings. And usually in my field, we don't blame people, we think about the environment. And what I realize is that what I call the funnel of misbelief, by the way, almost everybody in the world now has people in our lives that 5 years ago we said, oh, me and this other person, we're like peas in a pod. We see the world in the same way. And now you look at those people and say, I don't believe they're the same species. They see everything in such a different way. How does it happen? So this book is basically trying to understand how this happens. And the story is that the first building block for misbelief is stress. And I don't mean stress of the form, gee, I'm so busy, I don't know how I'll finish all my emails today. I mean stress of the form, I don't understand how the world works. What is this virus in China? Why are the Houthis attacking? I don't understand our government. I don't understand media. I like why did I lose my job and other people didn't? I don't see anybody dying. Why is the government closing us? Basically saying, I don't understand the world. And when we have this state, when we don't understand the world, we have a need for a story, and we have a need for a villain. And the internet often provides us a story and a villain, and we adopt it. And it's a little bit like itching a mosquito bite. When you have a mosquito bite, Nobody would say, oh, the right way to do it is to itch it. No, itching it is terrible. But you have a real need to itch it. In the same way that when you're stressed, you don't understand where the world is going, what's happening around you, you have a real itch to find a story with the villain. It's not healthy for you, but it's a real itch. And that's really what starts it. So if everybody was not stressed, we would not have misbelief and conspiracies and so on. But stress is like, it's not enough, but it's the building block for that. Now, let me say something else. And I don't think I gave it enough space in the book, but the antidote for stress is resilience.
Mm.
And when we have resilience, we're capable of withstanding what's much more stress. And when we don't, even little stress can break us.
Yeah.
So what is resilience? So if we go back to our story from earlier, you walk around life, slightly better, slightly worse, boom, your life gets worse. We usually think about resilience about how long does it take you to get back? And do you get back to where you were, slightly higher, slightly lower? That's resilience, like the bounce back. But resilience is not just about the bounce back. Resilience is also about the way we manage our life without anything bad happening. And in that regard, resilience is a little bit like an insurance policy. Like imagine you walking around life. What do you think will happen if something bad happened to you? Would there be somebody to catch you? What would be if you had a romantic breakup, if you got fired, if you broke your leg? Would there be somebody to take you, to help you, and so on? That's resilience. There's a story, there's a term called secure attachment. And secure attachment is a development style that has huge impact on the rest of life. And here's the secure attachment test. Person one takes their kid to the playground, and they say to the kid, go to the swing. The kid goes to the swing, comes back half an hour later. If you've done that, you have a kid with secure attachment. Case number two, go to the swings. The kid goes to the swings, but every 90 seconds, they look behind their shoulder to see if you're still there. Not so successful in secure attachment. The question is the kid certain that you'll be there for them if needed? That's the key for secure attachment. And by the way, it's good for everybody. That's also what we want from the government. Right? In the US, for example, people who are on what's called Medicaid, on medical health insurance from the government, the terms of when they get kicked out are very unclear. So 1 month they could make $5 more, and then they get kicked out of that system. They don't have secure attachment. They don't have security. They never know when it will be taken away. And so think about this idea of resilience. COVID, of course, was very bad because we were isolated. But in general, we have a trend that we spend less time with our friends and more time with our nuclear family. Right? I don't know if I'm guessing Australia, it's the same thing, right?
So, yeah, it was pretty bad.
No, but not during COVID. If you look at the last 30 years, like men used to leave work and go to the pub. Now I'm guessing they're going home more. People used to gather on weekends. They do it less. We are more nuclear family. We're less friends. Also at work, people talk much less about personal things. The Me Too movement that had all kinds of positive things also changed dramatically discussions in offices. The asking questions about, asking advice about romantic things became difficult. And recently, because politics have been so divisive, a lot of businesses ask people not to even talk about politics. So what are the chances that we will have friends at the workplace when we can't talk to them about personal things and we can't talk about politics? So less time with people. The people we do spend time on It's like talk work, don't be friends. And then the last component is social inequality. It turns out that as social inequality increases, even at the level of the neighborhood, people are less likely to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it's kind of exposes weakness. It's actually very hard to ask for help. It's much easier to give help than to ask for help. People don't appreciate that. So anyway, so with the high time of stress, low time of resilience, and that's what gets the ball rolling. And then there's lots of other elements. There's the element of what media we look at. There's an element of our cognitive system fooling us in many ways. And of course, there's the social components that really kind of drive us crazy in this regard and get us to pick identity politics at the end of the day and to become even more certain in what we've done. So maybe we'll talk about two of those. Is this okay?
Yeah, please. I'd like to get into that
Okay.
because it's very interesting.
So one of the elements, and there are more and so on, but one of the elements we call shibolet. So what is shibolet? There was a story in the Bible that these two tribes had a very tough war. At the end of the war, they settled on two sides of the river. But then when they walked around, they wanted to know if the other person is from their tribe or from the other tribe. And it was just the case that they pronounced the name for the plant, shibolet, in slightly different ways. One of them said she-bolet, one of them said si-bolet. So what did they do? I would walk around and I would say, hey, here's this plant. What's the name? Now, if you said my name, perfect. You're one of my brothers, we'll hug and everything will be okay. If you gave the other names, I will try to chase you away and maybe kill you. Now, we use now this term shibolet for a speech that is not about the facts, but about identity. I show you the plant, I ask you what's the name of the plant, but do I care about the name of the plant? No. What do I care about is your identity. Now, think about political discourse. How much of the political discourse is about facts and how much is about identity?
Yeah.
In the US context, there's no questions. There's so much about identity.
Yeah.
There's so much about identity. By the way, I don't know if in the video you could see the bottom of my Zoom name. I don't know if the people will be able to see that.
Humble vegan.
So I said humble, vegan, and I said an expert in virtue signaling. Right? So virtue. So of course, I'm not humble and I'm not vegan. But there's so much of our speech that is really not about the fact. It's about signaling. It's about identity, who we are, and so on. And people think, oh, it's only the other side of the political spectrum that does that. No. Everybody does that. So that's one important component. Another important component is ostracism. And this is a place where I think actually we have kind of valuable advice for people. So let's talk for a second about ostracism. The research on ostracism is fascinating. There's a guy who went for a walk in the park. He described how this research started. He walked in the park with his dog. Two people are playing frisbee, and all of a sudden the frisbee falls next to his feet. He picks it up, he throws it to one of them, and to his surprise, they throw it back. And the three people play for a few minutes. Great. And then they stop throwing it. They just throw between the two of them. And he got unbelievably offended. What's going on? Why don't they like me? Now, he didn't know them. He didn't come to the park to play. But he went back and he started doing research on that. And in his research, he mimicked kind of this situation. So he had a lab with some outdoor space, and he invited a participant to come in a particular hour. And when the participant came, he met two research assistants. Now, he didn't know there was a research assistant, but there were just three people waiting. And they said, oh, we'll call you in 10 minutes. And during those 10 minutes, one of the research assistants picked up a ball and they tossed it between the three of them for 10 minutes. So in that condition, a participant came, they played ball with two other people for 10 minutes, and then they came to do the experiment. They opened the door, say, come in, let's test you. In the other condition, the researchers came, met two other people, one of them picked up a ball, they start tossing the ball to each other. They tossed it for 5 minutes, and then they stopped tossing it to the participant. And they just kept on playing between themselves. So this was kind of mimicking the park experience. Now, that's not a big deal. 10 minutes playing versus 5 minutes playing and 5 minutes being ostracized. But then again, they open the door, call them in, and test them. Everything good about humanity went down. People were less optimistic. They were less generous. They cheated more. They gave less money to charity. All kinds of things. And the reality is that being ostracized is a terrible, terrible feeling. It's a terrible, terrible feeling. And I don't know about you, but when I thought about ostracism together with misbelief, I realized that I've done some big mistakes. I used to have a phrase that was, what is the color of the sky in your world? Mm-hmm. So when people would come to me with some strange theories about life, Bill Gates, the Illuminati, G5, all kinds of things, that was my phrase. Now, I thought it was slightly funny, not very funny, but I thought it was slightly funny. But in retrospect, I think that the people I made fun of thought it was very offensive. Mm. Right? These were people at the beginning of their journey down the funnel of misbelief. They were not full-fledged misbelievers. They were just questioning things. Things were just strange to them. They were also in a stressful time in their life, all kinds of things. Look, they needed a hug. They needed support, and instead, I slightly ridiculed them. And I think we all do that, right? It's very hard to take somebody you love, that you thought was like you, and all of a sudden they have these strange opinions about the government, about abortions, about the election, about COVID, about think about what's happening in Australia with anti-Semitism. Yeah, right. There's a large group of people that say, "Weren't we your friend until 10 minutes ago? How is the war in Gaza changing? What you know me? Yeah. You know me. What happened? My daughter. I'm right now in the US, and my daughter is in 12th grade. Some of her friends in high school said they were Hamas supporters. She was friends with them now. She feels that they feel that the world would be a better place if she was not alive. This very tough. Anyway, ostracism is very natural, because when we have differences, we want to separate. That's kind of very, very natural for people, us versus them, tribalism, and so on, but very destructive for us as a society. And the last part I will say about the social element is cognitive dissonance. So we all know the term cognitive dissonance. We sometimes use it, but we don't always use it correctly. So let's remind ourselves what cognitive dissonance is. The original story is that Festinger read in the paper there was this woman who said that a particular night the world is going to end and only her followers will be saved. Some aliens will come and they will save her followers. Everybody else would die. Now, Festinger didn't think the world would end, but he wondered what would happen to her followers. And for simplicity, let's think about diehard followers and on-the-fence followers. And he said, who would be more upset? Now, the diehard followers gave up their homes and gave up their money and gave everything to charity and said goodbye to everybody. The on-the-fence followers didn't risk anything. Now, you would think that the diehard followers the next day would wake up and say, oh, the world did not end. She lied to us. That woman is terrible. I'm going home. Mm. But what Festinger predicted is that they will experience a huge dissonance. They would experience a huge dissonance between their actions, giving up their home, selling, getting divorced, doing all kinds of things for preparation, and the action, which doesn't seem like she was correct. Now, they can't change. They can't change what they did. They can't say, "Oh no, I really didn't sell my house. Oh no, I really didn't give all my money to charity." So he said that to settle this, they will start believing in her even more. And that's what they saw. The next day, the people that were on the fence said, "Oh, we didn't know she was real. She was not. It turns out she's not. Let's go home." The people who were die-hard followers increased their effort. They doubled down. They went to recruit more people and raise more money. They said, "Oh, she's the one who saved the world." And the notion of cognitive dissonance is that preferences follow our actions.
Yep.
Usually we think we have preferences and our preferences guide our actions. But cognitive dissonance says it also works the other way, that our actions, whatever we do, also influence our preferences. And that means that somebody who's joined a group online and posted a few things online and have said a few things and so on are going to be a different person on the other side of that. Right? In the same way that in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, let's take Harvard, for example. If you take students at Harvard who didn't know anything about Israel and Palestine and Gaza and Hamas, but they went to two demonstrations and they burned a flag, they are now a different person. Their actions, demonstration, burning a flag, is now going to make them into different people. And in the case of misbelievers, it means that even when the thing itself dies, people cannot go back. So think about COVID. It's not about after COVID, people said, "Oh, COVID is over." No, it's not over, because once people have developed those beliefs, they move it to other things. So Agenda 21, I don't know if you know all these things. Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, globalism, the hoax of global warming. People are moving into all kinds of things like that. So anyway, so the funnel of misbelief with all of these elements, emotion and stress, cognitive, personality, social, we just touched on them, but it's a system that attacks almost every element of our personality. You can read this book almost like an introduction to psychology book that is just thinking about how all of these elements are attacking us. It's our weaknesses in each of those and how our current system is designed to attack those and get us down to a funnel of misbelief. And the bigger envelope to all of this is trust. The moment, imagine I ask you, which conspiracy is the least harmful? Which conspiracy would you not mind bringing a day to meet your mother?
The earth is flat.
Okay, that's what people mostly answer. So, what's the harm? By the way, I hope your mother's treatment was successful the other day.
It was, yes.
But good. But people think, the earth is flat, is not very harmful. Like if somebody doesn't believe in COVID and your parents are older, you don't want to bring them home because they can have an influence. If somebody believes the earth is flat, you say, okay, I can bring them home. They're not going to actually change the curvature of the earth by their beliefs. But the reality is that it's one of the most interesting and bizarre conspiracy theories, because they don't just believe that the earth is flat. They believe that NASA is lying. And the US government is lying, and that every pilot is lying, and there are no such things as satellites. And because they believe that so many people know it and don't talk about it, it's actually a very, very complex perspective. And in my mind, misbelief is about a belief in something that ain't so, but it's also a perspective from which you view the rest of life. And if you have a flat earther, it's not just the curvature of the earth. Like if you think that NASA is lying and every pilot knows the truth and no satellites and so on, you start believing in all kinds of other things. You're starting being suspicious. Where else are they lying to me in this way? And
Yeah.
and also the flat Earth is interesting because why are they lying to you? It's not just they're lying. Say what's the motive? Where's the interest? What is going on here? What else do they want to do to me? But by the way, if somebody believes in God, it's generally a good thing, right? People wake up and they think there's this good entity that mostly takes care of them. Sometimes there's a devil, but mostly God wins, and it's kind of a comforting thought to say, oh, there's a benevolent entity out there that takes care of us. If you believe in conspiracies, this is an awful way to live.
Mm.
You think that there are awful people out there with tremendous amount of power who are out there to get you, that they want to install G5 chips and make your kids infertile, and they want to take control, and they derive some pleasure, and they have, all kinds of other things. It's a downward spiral that is very hard to escape, but it's a very, very awful way to live. I think a couple of my big lessons was not to discount the people or the theories. They're just wonderful, caring, smart, intelligent. They're wonderful people. They had stress, had an itch, and they went down the funnel. But we should understand that these theories fulfill the need at some point. And the other thing is, I realized what a difficult life they have.
Mm.
Nobody would choose that. Like, if you could choose believing in a benevolent God or believing that there's some evil entity who wants to take over with lizard people or G5 chips, that's just a terrible way to live.
I definitely agree. And even if you were to take those people, the flat earthers, even if you were to take them up in a rocket to see the earth and how it's sphere, they still wouldn't believe you. They would still be
Yes.
like, nah, you're lying to me. This is all fake. The takeoff was fake. Everything surrounding it isn't real. So there's that element to it. And then also touching on
once we adopt something, so in the funnel of misbelief, in the early stages, if you see one of your friends just starting to question belief, they can still be saved. At a certain point where people get so committed to their beliefs and their social environment is so much around that they work very, very hard not to change their mind. And we all do it. So let me ask you, in the last 3 years, how many times had you had a deep discussion with somebody for, let's say, an hour? You had different point of view and so on. You had a deep discussion with somebody. And at the end of the hour, that person said, you know what? You're absolutely right. I never thought about this before. I'm changing my opinion. And how many times have you said that to somebody? You know what? You're absolutely right. You brought such interesting, important point. I'm completely changing my worldview. Let's agree that it doesn't happen often.
No, I can't. Nothing's coming to mind at the moment. No, I mean, it always comes down to let's agree to disagree.
That's right. So now the reason for that, so let's take a prototypical thing. There's an hour. You talk for half an hour. The other person talks for half an hour. What happens in the half an hour that you don't talk? You could say, I listen. But no, you don't listen. What you do is you counter argue. What you do is the moment they start talking, you imagine you're building up your own argument. So we each talk for half an hour, and we each talk in our mind for half an hour defending our position, but we just don't listen. So why would the flat earther be different? Like we're using all when somebody else talks at you, you don't listen, you just counter argue. Like we do it all the time. Everybody does it. Like we say, oh, those other people, but no, we are just the same. We don't listen. We're not open-minded. We're not easily convinced, and so on. So there's a very interesting trait called intellectual humility, and I don't like the name, but the idea is very nice. Intellectual humility is about the idea that we are inherently not so sure about our beliefs. You say, I think that the elections in the US were not stolen, but maybe. I think that global warming is real, but maybe. And this slight willingness to admit that you might be wrong is incredibly important. And again, why? Because if misbelief is a belief, but also a lens, once this lens is not 100%, it doesn't become a lens.
Mm.
Because you don't start looking at everything this way. Let's just take somebody who's a flat earther. If somebody says, you know what, I think the earth is flat, but I'm not so sure. Now you're not mistrusting everybody. You just say, I'm just not so sure. I want to explore more, to understand more. I'm open to new information. So this notion of intellectual humility, basically being less sure, it's one of those things that we all need to aspire to. And I think actually we should start teaching in schools. Like, how do we get people? Like, we have such a need to tell a story, a definitive story, and so on, but it's not helpful to us. What we really want is to say, here's the story, but it also might not be the truth.
Kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you know him, Stephen Crowder on YouTube, where he had this series. He would go to college campuses and he would have a table set up. He would have a question. It would be a rather provocative question. And then underneath it would go, change my mind. And he would have all these college students sit down with him, and then they'd have like this dialogue, and you'd have like the college student trying to convince Stephen of why they're right and why he's wrong. And then Stephen would try and convince the college student of why he's right and why his statement that was posed as a question is right, and why the college student is wrong for thinking the way they're thinking. It's rather interesting, actually, to watch a lot of the reactions from college students, because, I mean, going to your Israel and Palestine point, I think what's happened on college campuses is really sad. The level of anti-Semitism is just absolutely shocking. And you've got this group, Queers for Palestine, that pop up, and you're going, what the hell? What are you thinking? Like, you have got no idea what would happen to you if you go over to Palestine. You'd be killed. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So, there's a lot, of course, to say about college campuses, but I'll tell you what's my biggest disappointment. My biggest disappointment is that colleges have not had any leadership.
No.
Like, take Harvard just as an example, but take MIT. I was at MIT for a long time, so I'm extra disappointed with them. You have some of the smartest kids on the planet concentrated in one place. Like the concentration of skill, ability, intelligence, motivation is unbelievable. And you have people from Israel, Jewish people, Palestinians, Muslims. What would you do if you had some of the brightest minds, hopefully with the brightest professors, all together from all of these fractions? Like, what you would say is, what an opportunity to solve a real life problems. Universities are non-for-profits. We're supposed to work to promote society. Here is a tragedy. You have all the representatives come up with solutions.
Yeah.
Now, would they come up with solutions? Would it be feasible? I don't know. But what a real leader of a university would do would say, we're taking 2 weeks and we're just going to forget history, forget who did who to what and who's more to blame and who is more wrong. Let's propose interesting out-of-the-box solution. Let's be leaders. Like, that's what university is supposed to do. We're not a business. We are for the public benefit. And what they did instead is they showed how people cannot get along even 3,000 miles away, and we're just fighting. So that's the thing that disappoints me the most. And by the way, after the Congress hearing and so on, one of my worries is that, like, if you took a step like this and you say, let's take 2 weeks and do this, some people would complain. Some newspapers would complain and so on. But I think that everybody now is so afraid of making mistakes that nobody's doing anything courageous. Right? We're opting for this. Oh, I just don't want any news reports about me. I just don't want anything. So let me do nothing. Let me hide. Let me ask the students to be quiet. Let me put all my effort to try and and quiet down. No, that's not the right approach. The right approach is to say, what is our mission? What are we supposed to do here? Let's try and so that's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that the smartest kids on this planet with the smartest faculty and the most affluent and in the best environment and so on resort to cheap conflicts, annoyance, hatred, violence without doing anything meaningful. That's just awful. That's just awful.
I agree with you. Winston Churchill that said it takes courage to stand up and speak, but it also takes courage to sit down and listen. And I think we've lost the ability to courageously stand up and speak what we truly believe in that makes sense with logic, reason, and rationale. But we've also lost the ability to courageously sit down and truly listen to a person, not what you were saying before, trying to, change or, all that sort of stuff. It just doesn't work anymore. And we're starting to realize that more and more. You have all these college institutions that are they're indoctrinating, they're not educating anymore. And they're telling young kids, you need to think this way. If you don't think this way, then you're going to be ostracized. And the kids fear ostracism. So they freak out and they're going, all right, let's do this group kind of think. And even though they sound really stupid at the time, it's sad to see because they're smarter than that.
Yeah. They and the other thing is that students should know that the world is complex. Like in principle, every lecture should get them to think that the world is more interesting and more complex than it was. Maybe the introductory classes say, oh, we figured it. But after the introductory classes, every class should teach you that there's more mystery and more confusion and more things to study, and the world is more complex and less clear. And then, but we don't do that. We don't do that. We don't challenge them. We don't get them to think. The set of tragedies happening in the world now is horrendous. But I'll tell you what my hope is. The story of the frog with the boiling water is not true, but the principle is still there. So things have been going badly for a long time. Things have been going badly for a long time in Israel, in Gaza. Things have been going wrong for a long time in Ukraine, in Russia, in American universities, and the US in general. Europe. I mean, we have lots of tragedies that are like slow creep that are coming about, and we haven't mastered the courage or the urgency to deal with them. Mm. And I'm hoping that these set of tragedies now would compel us to take a deep look and take the right step. Now, if we don't, that will be a waste. But I'm hoping that we will. Just think about universities. I hope that people would now look at universities, think anew about what is the mission of universities outside of getting big endowments, and basically say, let's make sure that we live up to that mission. So we're set up in the right way. And what are we? How do we treat our fellow countries? What is our obligations to Hamas, to the Palestinians? What's happening with UNRWA, for example. Here's a body of the UN that helped terrorists. And of course now they're upset that some of their funding is going away. But this happened for a long time. Like I think that we certainly need to help the Palestinian refugees, and lots of things need to happen. It can't be that the UN helps terrorist organizations. That's just not going to happen. But people have complained about UNRWA. I heard some of the complaints about UNRWA. I never took them into account. But all of a sudden you say, oh my goodness, some of these Hamas terrorists were funded by UNRWA. That's just like, let's catch ourselves and let's fix things. So that's my hope. By the way, the same thing is true about misbelief. When I started writing this book, I thought that, I'll have a chapter on solutions. I don't have chapter of solution. I have these little sections called hopefully helpful. But I think that if we decide that dealing with misbelief is important, we could deal with it. So my hope is to bring it up. I think that there's nothing else we could do before we solve the problem of misinformation.
Mm.
I don't think we could tackle global warming. I don't think we could tackle polarization. I don't think we could tackle anything real before we deal with misinformation. So my hope is to say, okay, let's put that on the top of our priorities. And if we decide to do it, there's lots of things we can do. We just have to decide that this is urgent enough.
Who decides what's misinformation to begin with?
Well, so there's a long discussion. I think some of it is quite clear.
Yeah.
Some of it is quite clear. And also, I think we need a real separation between discussion about facts and discussion about opinions. Like if we said the Shibboleth thing is very confusing, if people are claiming facts, they should declare that they are claiming facts, and we should hold them to very high standards.
Yeah.
If people are claiming opinions, different story. But let's separate those two. Anyway, there's lots of things to do, but we need to decide to do it and then to start doing it.
I know our time has come to an end, my friend, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time. And I'm hopeful that people listening to this will actually have their mind not necessarily change, but they'll start thinking about changing their mind in some way, shape, or form based on what you said. I think that is really important. And I'm grateful that there are people like you out there in the world that are really intelligent and wise and are sharing this kind of information with people. I'll make sure everyone knows where to get a copy of your book. It'll be in the show description below. But Dan, thank you for joining me today on the Storybox podcast.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure talking to you. Looking forward to next time.